Good morning again. I'm Jim Whaley. Welcome to Sunday. In Sydney last week, it caused a fight between a taxi driver and his passenger. In the United States, it's being branded as damaging to health as asbestos. It's smoking, an issue that can be relied on to generate lots of heat these days, though we are starting to see some light. Increasingly, governments are abandoning admonition and actively legislating to curb tobacco use. In a couple of days, New Zealand will take the anti-smoking debate a significant step forward, with a law banning all cigarette advertising, all sports sponsorship by tobacco companies, and requiring all workplaces to provide non-smoking areas. As Sunday's Helen Daly will report, it's a move that already has New Zealanders in opposing corners.
For every $1 the health charities that I represent spend in New Zealand saying don't smoke, the industry spends 40. That's why we're losing the battle. That's why 50 kids a day in New Zealand start smoking.
Forget about all that. Cancer, heart disease, emphysema, stroke stuff. Gentlemen, we're not in this business for our health.
I would like it to be said that New Zealand put public health ahead of the private wealth of tobacco companies, who, after all, only thrive on selling a product which kills people.
I think I know. I spoke to Mr. Philip Morris recently on the phone, and Phil, of course, is not all in the best of health. And if Phil's watching, all the best. I hope the operation's been a success.
New Zealand taking the lead in the crusade against smoking. Our cover story this Sunday from Helen Daly. Now to our cover story, the smoking debate. Norway and Thailand have both banned cigarette advertising. Canada has also banned sports sponsorship by tobacco companies and claimed an 8% drop in smoking last year. In a couple of days, New Zealand will go still further, introducing a bill to outlaw tobacco advertising and sponsorship and requiring even private workplaces to provide non-smoking zones. As Sunday's Helen Daly reports, the tough trans-Tasman approach may well speed up Australia's dilatory efforts to curb a habit once considered debonair, now condemned as deadly.
Cigarettes, those sticks of toxic nicotine, tar and carbon monoxide, are now the most vilified legal product in the world. 18,000 Australians die each year from smoking-related diseases. Across the Tasman, more than 4,000 Kiwis die annually. 1,000 Americans die every day from smoking. In total, tobacco kills 2.5 million people each year worldwide, the #1 cause of preventable death.
The human lung is like a sponge.
Health authorities have pushed for 2 decades to stop the spread of the tobacco epidemic. With some success, smoking in general in the West is declining. But among children, teenagers, young women and the poor, consumption is increasing. And in Asia, Africa and South America, the rise is rapid. Smoking is no longer simply a public health issue pushed by do-gooders. Now it's an economic issue, a moral issue, and most importantly, a political issue.
The theme for this conference is the global war. The analogy with war is apt.
Across the globe, politicians like New Zealand's Health Minister and Deputy Prime Minister Helen Clark are weighing in for full-scale battle. Legislation, rather than voluntary agreements with tobacco companies, is their big gun, aimed squarely at the industry's jugular, their ability to promote the product.
Ahora es el momento de fumar un Colorado.
By the end of this year, advertising could be banned in some 20 major tobacco markets, with promotion severely restricted in 30 others.
Go Cap, Go Mild. 야메로 마일도 자꾸 진화투발.
The tobacco versus health debate is definitely open conflict between parties, and they are armed. On the one side, the facts about the damage done by tobacco, and on the other, the enormous wealth of an industry which thrives on the promotion of a product responsible for so much death and disease.
Helen Clark's blunt declaration of war reflects the electoral cachet for governments who take on the tobacco industry with the toughest weapon of all, legislation. Further, the potential savings in hospital and health bills have finally dawned on politicians. Australian governments received $1.7 billion in revenue from cigarettes last year. Yet we spend $1 billion on direct health care, and an estimated $2 billion is lost in earnings due to premature deaths.
You know, tobacco was first grown in America. It has a great sentimental attachment to our history. Well, now the tobacco companies are being looked upon as international drug pushers.
The tobacco industry has a very serious multi-billion-dollar problem. We need more cigarette smokers, pure and simple.
Released last month in California by the Department of Health, this ad represents the toughest stand yet taken by a government department against the industry.
So, forget about all that. Cancer, heart disease, emphysema, stroke stuff. Gentlemen, we're not in this business for our health.
In Canada too, the government bit the bullet a year and a half ago, banning all advertising, tobacco sponsorship, and ensuring that every government-regulated workplace was smoke-free. It was the first English-speaking country to do so. And in the past year, consumption has dropped by 8%.
The government found out from polls that the tobacco industry had no credibility, that it was practicing deception. The deception offended members of Parliament. They found out from their polls that the public wanted this industry to be hit hard.
In New Zealand, comprehensive legislation is expected to be introduced this week, banning all advertising, sports and cultural sponsorship, and forcing every public and private workplace in the country to specify smoking and non-smoking areas.
Smoking is not the norm. It shouldn't be the norm. We want to promote non-smoking as the norm. And it's very difficult to do that when you've got conflicting messages. For every $1 the health charities that I represent spend in New Zealand saying don't smoke, the industry spends 40. That's why we're losing the battle. That's why 50 kids a day in New Zealand start smoking.
Indeed, 36% of women between 15 and 34 years of age are on the smoking merry-go-round, compared to a quarter of the general population. Lung cancers in women tripled between 1964 and 1980, and Maori women are believed to have the highest lung cancer rates of any population group in the world.
I would like it to be said that New Zealand put public health ahead of the private wealth of tobacco companies, who, after all, only thrive on selling a product which kills people.
The proposed bans will outlaw ads in New Zealand's print media, as well as heavy cigarette promotion at local dairies, the Kiwi equivalent of the corner store.
There certainly appears to be a link between its promotion and the level of consumption. I'm convinced that where bans have been comprehensively implemented and are backed up by other measures, as we have, that we can substantially bring down the rate of tobacco consumption.
One only has to look at countries where there is no advertising, and the very easy example is the Eastern Bloc, and we see that yet people smoke in very high levels. Now, the health community has no answer to that, and I think, frankly, that many sections of the health community realise that advertising bans are an exercise in cosmetics.
What ultimately convinced the Health Minister to push for comprehensive legislation was this unequivocal report by the Toxic Substances Board, which focused on whether advertising and promotion by tobacco companies should be banned. Now, whilst the industry argues vociferously that advertising bans simply don't cut smoking rates, this report drowns out those arguments. After studying advertising controls in 33 countries, the report found that the more advertising is permitted, the greater is the increase in consumption. Similarly, the more a government controls cigarette advertising, the greater is the decline in smoking by both adults and young people.
Murray, hey, how are we going on the youth consumption study?
Dr Murray Logerson is the New Zealand Health Department's expert on the effects of advertising on smoking rates, not only in his home territory, but around the world.
Where we can intervene is with the under 25s and reduce the pressure on them to smoke. Now, we know that they're getting that pressure from other things besides advertising. They're getting it from their friends. But the fire is being fueled all the time by advertising.
Reinforcing the toxic substances report is a recent study by the Health Department. It shows that consumption among young people of the most popular brand Winfield almost exactly mirrors the rise and fall in Winfield's advertising spend.
Well, I don't think that the attractiveness of the advertising or otherwise is the fact that's going to determine whether people smoke.
But it could help them.
Well,
I mean, the health authorities
lots of
aren't
things
saying
could
it's
happen.
it's the only factor.
Well,
They're saying
the
it
health
is one
authorities can't
factor.
provide evidence to support that it is a factor at all.
Australian and New Zealand tobacco companies claim they do act responsibly. New Zealand allows no people to feature in cigarette ads. In New South Wales and Queensland, the companies agreed to remove people from ads only last year in their voluntary agreements. Attractive lifestyle commercials were also removed from cinemas in Australia. Tobacco companies claim they aren't trying to appeal to young people. Yet it's hard to believe these ads would do anything else.
Now imagine saying to your advertising agency, I want you to make an advertising campaign that makes our brand extremely attractive to the 19-year-old smokers of our competitors' brand. When you do that, make absolutely sure that you don't make the brand attractive to the 18-year-old who hasn't quite made up his or her mind whether or not to smoke.
So you think it's okay for cigarette companies to promote their wares to young people?
Well, we think it's okay for cigarette companies to promote their wares. And if it's
So it
young
doesn't matter
people,
whether
it's
young people
middle-aged
read
and
it.
adult people. Young people have got to make choices in life, so do middle-aged people.
That's why the Hawke government and the opposition decided to support a Democrat bill to ban all print advertising from December this year, much to the industry's despair.
Harassing smokers or denying information to people who choose to smoke is something that can't be sustained. And we believe that companies such as those we represent that make legal products should be allowed to communicate to their customers.
In New Zealand, the tobacco industry closets itself in boardrooms. The industry lobby group cancelled its interview with Sunday at the last minute, but others are happy to mouth its arguments.
The freedom of speech, which is a very fundamental freedom in any country, and particularly in the current environment, is being transgressed in a way that we can't tolerate. I don't think we are crying about the few $1 million we're going to lose. It's far more important that the principles established, that we have freedom of speech.
I think it is a complete perversion of the freedom of speech argument to say that that freedom should apply to enticing young people, and we're talking about young people, into a deadly habit before they are mature enough to judge that habit on its merits.
The freedom to say and think what we believe.
In the US, that argument gains all the more clout because of a constitution that makes individual rights sacred. In this commercial, giant Philip Morris subtly milks the fear of losing those rights.
Join us in supporting the National Archives celebration of the 200th anniversary of the Bill of Rights.
American cigarette advertising still promotes sexy, successful, elegant images of people smoking. And spreading out around the world is the most winning, particularly among 15 to 24-year-olds. That's the Marlboro Man. As doors close in the West, the cigarette company's advertising push is turning elsewhere. In the developing world, the grip of Western cigarettes is tightening.
In a Marlboro country, the good smoke.
In the Philippines, the Marlboro Man still strides across TV screens, although he bit the dust on American television over a decade ago. The smoking cowboy is advertised on Chinese television, even though no Marlboro cigarettes can be sold there. But foreign tobacco companies are poised to go into China, the biggest cigarette market in the world.
Super Dream. Super American taste. American Super.
Yet in countries where these ads are shown, like Japan and South Korea, the percentage of smokers is nearly double that in the West.
I think it's appalling to invade the territory of Korea and Taiwan and say you must have American advertising. And what they're doing to Thailand at the moment, I think, is quite disgraceful.
Thailand has banned the sale of multinational cigarettes and all advertising, and is feeling the blowtorch of American cigarette companies. To sell more product in Asia, they've pressured their own government to wield the big stick of trade sanctions. The US government is trying to force Thailand to import American cigarettes. Sponsorship of sporting events in Asia is another avenue the industry has explored. In fact, the issue of tobacco sponsorship of sport and culture remains the stickiest for governments worldwide, but especially in sport-mad countries like Australia and New Zealand.
It's a circumvention of the voluntary agreement. We tried to trust the industry, and obviously they can't be trusted not to market to children. At the Rothmans one-day cricket series, I photographed Rothmans representatives handing these out to children as they walked through the gate. That's marketing to kids.
Now, how the heck can you associate the words Rothmans series with smoking?
Well, because Rothmans is a well-known tobacco company.
Yes, but if you're an innocent child coming along, how can it be associated? It's like saying, what is Rothmans? The kid doesn't know.
You can't seriously suggest that children who see Rothmans at your grounds wouldn't know it's being sponsored by a cigarette company.
I can say that they wouldn't.
An argument even the New Zealand Cricket Council wouldn't buy. 2 weeks ago, the Cricket Council bowled out Rothmans as a sponsor after 29 years.
Rothmans expected the long association to continue and was working on a new 3-year deal.
Health groups claimed victory.
I think the commercial reality is that it's not popular to be associated with the tobacco industry anymore.
While high-profile sports will have no trouble finding a replacement sponsor if Helen Clark's ban goes ahead, other sports are outraged.
It's going to cripple our sport. First of all, our international program will have to be severely cut. We will have to drag the resources from levels of levies, fees that junior players, senior players throughout New Zealand pay. That's where the money will have to come from. Otherwise, we won't play at all.
I don't smoke. It's the only way to stay ahead of the game.
For sports groups, the fear of losing financial security provided by tobacco companies will be placated by a government replacement fund, an idea borrowed by New Zealand from Victoria's successful Health Promotion Foundation.
The sporting lobby was a strong proponent of the tobacco industry's right to sponsor sport. We've been able to replace that money. Secondly, we've got money for health promotion, which is useful for countering the effects of the tobacco industry's advertising.
Tobacco sponsorship is still optional in Victoria, but the replacement funds from a cigarette tax are drawing sports away from tobacco dollars towards health dollars. The governing body of Aussie Rules Football is one.
We saw our game as a healthy pursuit for young Australians. All the evidence suggested that cigarette smoking was not a healthy pursuit, in fact a dangerous one. And we decided that we would therefore not engage in sponsorship from cigarette companies. And I think that's had a very healthy impact and effect in the sport.
While some Aussie Rules clubs are sticking to tobacco companies, most are quitting. Not so in New South Wales, where the Winfield Cup is a fixture. Winfield has recently re-signed the league to a fat 5-year contract, endorsed by the Greiner government. An attempt last year by the New South Wales Health Minister to implement tough legislation was knocked back by the Greiner cabinet.
Appreciate it. Many thanks to Winfield, who are a tremendous promoter of this game.
We allow people like Wayne Pearce, Peter Sterling, to encourage that children should not smoke. That is their right. And we have the right, then, as that major body, to at least have the right to choose our sponsor.
Do you have any moral dilemma that you are being sponsored by what most people would consider an unhealthy product?
Well, I guess when you suppose you look at the high profile of this game, that certain people could think that. But as I said, we're a very loyal organisation. We look back to the 30-odd years involvement that we have been given.
And now on 2BL and associated stations, the 1990 This Sporting Life Geek at League.
Well, let's talk Wally Lewis for the next 50 minutes.
Let's talk Wally Lewis. Let's talk King. Well, I saw him recently, actually, and he simply said to me, he said, Roy, I'm as fit as a fiddle. As fit as a fiddle. And he lit a smoke. And I said, what are you smoking a little bit more lately? And he said, Roy, I feel fitter when I smoke. He said, I'm a 30s man. I believe that cigarettes can cure all sorts of things. Can cure angina, groin injuries, shingles, piles, hemorrhoids, all those things that he suffers from. Dicky Ticker and, of course, a pulled hammy. The rugby league, they're sending out confused signals, Helen, to the kiddies. I mean, it's only the kiddies I'm concerned about, and...
I think I know. I spoke to Mr. Philip Morris recently on the phone, and Phil, of course, is not all in the best of health. And if Phil's watching, all the best. I hope the operation's been a success. I understand, you know, you can exist these days without either lung. And however, I think Mr. Morris is entirely right when he says he's not after kiddies, because I don't think that's how psychology works. I think the more you say you're not after the kiddies, the more it gets them in. If you said, come on in, kiddies, have the shop, have whatever you like, they wouldn't be interested. I know. They'd be down playing rugby league.
The sticking point for governments are the major international events. Formula One Grand Prix races, like the motorcycle races, are telecast a dozen times a year to 300 million viewers worldwide. If state governments ban tobacco sponsorship, the fear is that the Formula One would scrub Australia from its circuit. South Australia has simply exempted the Grand Prix from its tough tobacco restrictions. New Zealand, too, doesn't want to lose the round-the-world Whitbread race calling into New Zealand shores. If Helen Clark's legislation is passed, the government has decided this race, too, will be exempt. However unpalatable is the restriction of commercial freedom, politicians are realising that for the greater health, stricter limits must be imposed. In the fight to try and halt the addiction, the disease and deaths from smoking, measures so far haven't been enough. Now it's the legislators' turn. The law is the last resort to save precious lives and valuable health dollars.
The heightening debate over smoking. Our cover story, reported by Helen Dowie. Next, films and comedy, when we come back.